There's a chilling truth that Freud uncovered long before anyone dared to confront it. Beneath every sweet smile, beneath every comforting touch, lies a hunger that isn't for love. No, it's something far darker, far more primal, a yearning for conflict, for tension, for something that stirs the soul. And this truth, it applies especially to women. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, wasn't afraid to dive deep into the complexities of the human psyche. And when it comes to female desire, he saw what most men still don't understand. Women aren't drawn to safety. They're not seeking calm waters or emotional stability. They're drawn to danger. Not just any kind of danger, though. They're drawn to a man who doesn't need them, a man who is centered in his purpose, who doesn't bend to her every emotional swing, a man who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't lose himself in the hope of earning her affection. This isn't about bitterness. This isn't an insult. It's simply the anatomy of desire. It's the psychology that courses through our veins, engraved in the very bone and blood of who we are. If you, as a man, still believe that love is won through reassurance, consistency, and emotional availability, you're already playing the wrong game, because Freud exposed something that no one dared speak about. Female desire thrives on danger, on tension, on something she cannot have. If you can't grasp this, if you still think flowers and devotion will secure her loyalty, then you're already missing the point. Freud, the man who unraveled the mysteries of the unconscious mind, spent decades searching for one elusive answer. What does a woman want? And after years of studying wives, mistresses, daughters, and seductresses, he came to a conclusion that sent shockwaves through everything we thought we knew about love. What did he discover? That even she doesn't fully know, but her body knows, her instincts know. And it's that instinctual hunger that drives her in ways most men will never understand. Here's the paradox that Freud understood. Female desire doesn't follow reason. It isn't governed by logic or morality or what she says she wants. No, it's drawn to something far deeper, something more instinctual. She might say she wants a kind, dependable man, one who's there for her at every turn. But look at her actions and you'll see something else entirely. She ends up texting the guy who disappears, who doesn't always answer, the one who leaves her wondering, where did he go? She claims to want a man who listens, who comforts her in her moments of distress. Yet, she becomes obsessed with the one who makes her feel invisible, the one who doesn't seem to care about her emotional turbulence. She says she wants stability, but her heart races for the man who lives on the edge of chaos, the one who keeps her in a constant state of uncertainty. Why is this? Why does the reality never match the words? Because according to Freud, female desire is not about logic. It's not about what she claims to want. It's about what she cannot fully possess. It's about the hunt, the chase, the pursuit of something just beyond her reach. Freud called this the repetition compulsion, the psychological phenomenon where we are drawn not to what heals us, but to what reopens our deepest wounds. What she's really drawn to is the man who doesn't offer emotional safety, who doesn't give in to every need, who keeps his distance and leaves her longing for more. This doesn't mean women are cruel or manipulative. It simply means they are shaped by a primal instinct, one that doesn't always make sense but is built into the very fabric of their psychology. It's the tension, the emotional conflict, the uncertainty that creates the attraction. When a man resists her pull, when he doesn't chase her every emotional shift, she feels it. She feels the electricity of uncertainty. And it's that uncertainty that ignites desire. This is the core truth that Freud understood about human nature. Desire isn't about comfort. It's about conflict. And this is the tension that most men fail to grasp. They think that by being available, being vulnerable, by pouring their emotions into texts and long conversations, they will win her over. But the truth is far harsher. They've been taught the wrong lessons. What ignites female desire is not emotional availability, it's emotional mystery. It's power, restraint, and most importantly, a sense of inner strength that she cannot control. Here's where things get tricky. She'll tell you she wants a kind, attentive man, someone who listens and comforts her. But look at her actions. She's texting the guy who disappeared, the one who makes her feel ignored. She says she wants stability, but her heart races for the man who brings chaos, the one who keeps her on edge. Why the contradiction? Because, as Freud pointed out, desire isn't about what women claim to want. It's about what they actually respond to. Women may say they want a safe, predictable relationship, but what truly stirs their desire is emotional tension. It's the uncertainty. It's the chase. The man who is too available, too predictable, too eager to please becomes boring. He loses his mystery, and with it, her interest. When you give her everything too easily, when you're always there, emotionally available at every turn, you become just another presence in her life. But the man who withholds, who keeps a bit of himself hidden, who doesn't bend to her every mood, he remains intriguing, mysterious, and desirable. The truth Freud uncovered is that desire thrives on the unknown, on the tension between wanting and withholding, and that's what women are truly drawn to. Freud didn't stop at just identifying desire. He dug into the very roots of it. He understood that female desire had been shaped, twisted, and suppressed by society for centuries. But here's the catch. Repression doesn't erase desire. It distorts it. It forces it underground, hiding it behind a veil of politeness and civilization, but it doesn't kill it. Instead, it transforms it into something more dangerous, something raw and untamed. This is the power of repression. For centuries, women were expected to be modest, nurturing, and compliant. And in that suppression, something powerful was brewing. Freud believed that female sexuality was a dark continent, unexplored, unpredictable, and violently suppressed. As society forced women to fit into neat, socially acceptable roles, it drove their true desires deeper into the shadows. And this, Freud discovered, created a double life. On the surface, women were expected to be modest, family-oriented, and gentle. But beneath the surface, their unconscious minds were drawn to something else entirely. The forbidden, the dangerous, the chaotic. It's this tension between the conscious and unconscious that creates the deep craving for a man who cannot be tamed, who doesn't bend to societal expectations, who is unpredictable and free. Freud wasn't just talking about sex. He was talking about the emotional tension that women crave, the kind of tension that's found in the man who doesn't give in to every need, the man who remains independent, untouchable. That's what stirs desire, not because it's cruel or malicious, but because it's a reflection of a deeper, primal truth about human nature. And that truth is simple. Repression distorts desire, and in the distortion, the chase becomes even more intoxicating. Here's a concept that never seems to die: the bad boy. It's not just some fleeting fantasy, it's rooted in something deep and ancient. The bad boy represents a man who is untamed, unyielding, and most importantly, unpredictable. He isn't afraid to break the rules. He doesn't beg for affection. He doesn't apologize for being who he is. And that is the kind of man who sparks desire. Freud understood this dynamic. He wasn't suggesting women are drawn to cruelty, but to power. Power in its most raw form, power that is self-contained, unshaken by external forces. The bad boy is a man who cannot be controlled, who stays true to himself despite the chaos around him. That kind of strength is magnetic because it offers something women instinctively crave: the absence of need, the presence of a man who is centered in his own world, not dependent on her for validation. Most men don't understand this. They think if they give everything, if they pour their heart out, make themselves available at every turn, she will stay. But the truth is, that's exactly when she starts pulling away. It's not that women are cruel, it's that they're drawn to a man who remains emotionally centered, who isn't swayed by her moods, who doesn't bend when she pulls away. When you stay grounded in your own purpose, when you withhold just enough to keep her wondering, that's when desire begins to burn. Here's where things really shift. Freud's theory isn't about being emotionally distant for the sake of it. It's about mastering yourself, your emotions, and your desires. The key isn't to be emotionally unavailable. It's to withhold your need for validation, to not depend on her for your sense of self-worth. Women, whether they realize it or not, are drawn to a man who has emotional control, who doesn't react to every change in her mood, who doesn't bend when she pulls away. The man who can resist the temptation to chase after her every time she withdraws becomes the man who commands respect and ignites desire. When you stay true to your own path, when you remain centered in your purpose, you become emotionally safe in a way that makes her feel attracted, not because you give her everything, but because you don't need to. This creates tension. It makes her feel uncertain, and in that uncertainty, she feels the spark of attraction. The truth is, the more you try to please, the more you try to be available, the more you lose yourself, and the less she feels for you. But when you withhold your neediness, when you remain strong and centered in yourself, that's when desire grows. Freud's exploration of the unconscious mind was a game changer, especially when it comes to desire. What he uncovered is key to understanding female attraction. The unconscious mind, he argued, doesn't care about honesty, vulnerability, or emotional availability. It's not moved by transparency or confession. Instead, it responds to power dynamics, to archetypes, to symbols of strength and mystery. Women are drawn not to a man who reveals everything, who lays bare his emotions without reserve, but to a man who holds something back. The more you expose yourself emotionally, the more predictable you become. The more she understands your every thought, your every desire, the less she feels the need to chase, the less she feels that spark of intrigue. It's the mystery, the uncertainty, the emotional distance that creates attraction. Freud's insight was clear. Desire thrives on what is hidden, on what can't be fully possessed. When you reveal too much of yourself, when you're too emotionally available, you lose the very thing that draws her to you, your mystery. The man who can withhold, who doesn't give everything away at once, keeps her wondering, keeps her intrigued, and that is the essence of desire, creating just enough distance to keep her coming back for more. The core of attraction, according to Freud, isn't just emotional availability, it's self-containment. The man who understands his desires but doesn't act on them is the man who holds power. He's the one who doesn't rush to satisfy every impulse, every need, and he's the one who remains unshaken in the face of emotional chaos. Self-containment is about mastering your emotions, your urges, your impulses. When a man can control his instinctual desires, channel them into something greater, whether it's ambition, discipline, or purpose, he becomes a force. A man who has tamed his own chaos is a man who exudes quiet power, the kind of power that doesn't require validation. Freud believed that true mastery isn't about suppressing your emotions, it's about transforming them. The anger becomes ambition, the lust becomes discipline, the heartbreak becomes a legacy. When you take those primal instincts and turn them into higher pursuits, you become more than just a man reacting to his environment. You become the kind of man who creates, who doesn't need the world to validate his worth, because his inner world is already defined. And that is the type of man who commands respect, not through dominance over others, but through dominance over himself. When you master yourself, you no longer seek approval. You no longer beg for love. You simply become the man who walks into the room and doesn't have to prove anything. And it's in that stillness, that self-contained power, that attraction begins to spark. Here's the paradox that keeps most men confused. Women crave power, but they also crave surrender. They want strength, but they also want to submit to it. They seek stability, but they long for the chaos that challenges them. This creates a tension, a delicate balance between wanting to feel safe and wanting to feel challenged. It's the tension between certainty and uncertainty that stirs the deepest desire. Freud knew that true desire is born out of this very tension. Women aren't drawn to men who are completely emotionally available or predictable. Those men become too safe, too easy to figure out. Desire isn't nurtured in the presence of certainty. It's stoked in the uncertainty of emotional distance, in the space where she feels she doesn't have full control. A woman doesn't want a man who bends to her every need, who loses himself in her emotional world. She wants the man who stays grounded, who remains true to his own path, even when she pulls away. The man who stands firm in his purpose and refuses to be swayed by her mood swings. That's the man who creates the tension that fuels desire. The truth is, desire thrives on what we can't have, on what remains just out of reach. And when you stop chasing her, when you stop giving her everything, you become the man who is hard to ignore. The man who doesn't need her for validation, but instead remains anchored in his own mission, becomes the kind of man who commands her respect and awakens her deepest desires. So, how do you become the man who ignites desire? It's simple. Stop chasing approval. Stop seeking validation. Start building a life that doesn't need anyone else's approval to feel complete. Become the man who is emotionally self-sufficient, the one who lives for his own purpose, not to please or appease anyone else. The moment you start living for yourself, your own goals, your own mission, you'll stop being the man who chases affection and start becoming the man who commands respect. This isn't about changing who you are, it's about returning to who you were meant to be. It's about reconnecting with your own strength, your own inner power, and understanding that your value doesn't come from how much you give or how much you please others. It comes from your ability to remain centered, to stay focused on your own path, regardless of what anyone else does or says. When you become this man who doesn't bend, who doesn't need validation from others, who walks through life with unshakable purpose, that's when you start to attract the right kind of attention. It won't be because you're trying to please her. It will be because you become the kind of man who can't be ignored. She will be drawn to you, not because you've given her everything, but because you've kept something back, your purpose, your drive, your center. And in that, you become a man who is irresistible, not because you need her, but because you're already whole. This is the truth Freud saw, and this is the power you can reclaim. When you lead with your own mission, when you stop chasing and start building your own life, you become the kind of man who can love without needing to be loved in return. And that, my friend, is when true desire is awakened.